Trump's economic warfare against Canada isn't just backfiring, it's creating a full-scale disaster that's driving away the very people he needs most. While Trump pounds his chest about forcing Canada to become the 51st state, the reality is that his aggressive tactics are pushing Canadian homebuyers away from America in record numbers, dealing a devastating blow to the U.S. housing market and proving once again that his heavy-handed approach destroys more than it creates. The numbers paint a devastating picture of economic collapse.
We're starting to see the impact of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs as they begin to hit the Canadian economy. Here's a look at some of the latest data points to underscore that. The unemployment rate in August ticked up to 7.1%. That's the highest level in 4 years. The Canadian economy shrank by 1.6% in the second quarter of the year. And during that same period, Canada's productivity dropped by 1%, the biggest plunge in 3 years. These trends will likely factor into the Bank of Canada's next interest rate announcement Wednesday, as well as this fall's much anticipated federal budget, which the Prime Minister has said will be one of both austerity and investment. So, can the feds achieve both? And what is the biggest threat to Canada's economy right now? With me today is Business Council of Canada President and CEO.
Canadian unemployment has surged to 7.1%, GDP has contracted by 1.6%, and productivity has plummeted by a full percentage point. This economic devastation is a direct result of Trump's reckless tariff policies, which have created uncertainty and chaos in what was once the world's most stable trading relationship. Canadian interest in buying U.S. homes has crashed by almost 20% compared to last year, according to recent data from Redfin. This isn't just a minor dip, it's a massive exodus that began the moment Trump announced his additional 25% tariff on Canadian goods. The peak of this disaster came in April when Canadian interest in U.S. homes plummeted by a staggering 34.2% year over year, right after Trump's administration announced vast global tariffs, including a 10% levy on all imported goods. Florida, traditionally the #1 destination for Canadian snowbirds seeking vacation and retirement homes, is getting hit the hardest. This state that has always depended on Canadian buyers to fuel its real estate market is now watching that crucial revenue stream dry up, thanks to Trump's reckless trade war. West Palm Beach saw Canadian searches for homes plunge 26.6% year over year in August alone, while Tampa and Orlando also suffered massive drops of over 23% each. But here's what makes this even more catastrophic for Trump's America. Canadians historically make up 13% of all foreign buyers in the U.S. housing market, purchasing $5.9 billion worth of American real estate annually. That's billions of dollars in economic activity that Trump's tariff tantrums are driving away. In 46 of the 50 largest U.S. metropolitan areas, Canadian searches for homes have dropped, creating a nationwide housing market crisis that Trump's policies directly caused. The root of this disaster lies in Trump's delusional belief that he can bully Canada into submission through economic coercion. His strategy mirrors his broader approach to international relations, demanding allies do the heavy lifting while avoiding direct confrontation himself.
Go to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit that took place in Tianjin 2 weeks ago, which was clearly, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and India getting together to thumb their nose at Trump. So I think what is interesting, it's an admission on the part of Trump that he needs help to achieve his goal. And I think there is an opening for Canada and allies to say, okay, if you need our help, well, let's work together, but we need to be clear on what exactly we are trying to achieve here. And for instance, we would need a clear confirmation on the part of the U.S. that they would provide security. They would give security guarantees to Ukraine to prevent further invasion from Russia. But we need a lot more details on what exactly would happen, because Right now, what Trump is asking us to do is do the heavy lifting for him. He has not said himself that he would increase the tariffs that he has already applied to to China, because he knows that, in fact, China would immediately stop exporting rare earths and magnets to the U.S. So it's an interesting opening, but we should try to clarify and come up with a better game plan than what Trump has enunciated so far.
Former Canadian Ambassador Guy Saint-Jacques has analyzed this pattern, noting that Trump's tariff demands come after diplomatic setbacks with other world leaders, revealing his need for allied support despite his confrontational rhetoric. Yet Trump continues to ask allies to bear the economic burden of his trade wars, while he avoids taking direct action that might trigger retaliation against American interests. Trump's repeated calls for Canada to become the 51st state aren't just embarrassing diplomatic blunders, they're calculated attempts at economic imperialism that are backfiring spectacularly. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accurately diagnosed Trump's strategy, warning that Trump wants to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy because that'll make it easier to annex us. Trump's own words reveal the depth of his miscalculation. He threatened to use economic force to annex Canada, boasting about getting rid of what he called the artificially drawn line between the two countries. But this isn't 19th century imperialism, it's 21st century economic incompetence. Modern democracies don't respond well to threats and coercion, and Trump's heavy-handed approach is proving that his understanding of international relations is stuck in a bygone era. The economic devastation is spreading beyond the housing market. Leading economists have warned that Canada is simply not recession-ready to handle what's coming.
I think this would all be fine if we weren't dealing with Trump, because no renegotiation of CUSMA or anything else, we're not going to save the trade deal. We've gone through the looking glass. We are not integrated with the United States anymore, to the extent that we have had to jack up our defense spending. So if you think spending's out of control, but you don't want more spending on defense, you got a problem, because that's the world we're now in. We're in a world where maybe Russia is going to trigger a third world war. We're in a world where we're trying to recreate our alliances to protect our own sovereignty. We are not even talking about business investment anymore. We're talking about our ability to protect ourselves from the north, from the south, from wherever, because we have been in the crosshairs of the president's desire to take us over in many different ways, and it's total pandemonium south of the border. We are not in a regular business cycle. Falling productivity is happening because people are hanging on to their workers so that they don't have to lay them off as they wait to see, are they going to shutter entirely? Are they going to relocate entirely? We are not in a normal business cycle. To Goldie's point, if the interest rates come down with the central bank next week, it would make 0 sense, because price stability is their job number one, and everything's pointing to higher prices going forward. So why would you drop?
With employment insurance coverage at its lowest level since 1941, covering only 32.8% of unemployed workers, the country faces a potential cascade of economic dislocation. Both public and private sectors are cutting jobs simultaneously, creating a perfect storm where people could lose their homes as the social safety net proves inadequate to catch them. The Canadian response has been swift and unified. Opinion polls show that 90% of Canadians oppose Trump's annexation fantasies, with even conservative-leaning Alberta showing only 18% support, still a massive rejection of Trump's proposals. Canadian leaders across the political spectrum have condemned Trump's threats, with Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre stating definitively that Canada would never become a U.S. state. What's particularly damaging for Trump is that his tariff war is creating exactly the opposite of what he claims to want. Instead of making America stronger, his policies are weakening the U.S. economy by driving away foreign investment and buyers. The National Association of Home Builders estimates that existing tariffs have already raised the cost of constructing an average American home by $9,200. Trump's war on Canadian lumber, which supplies 85% of U.S. softwood lumber imports, threatens to drive construction costs even higher. Canada and Mexico are now actively working together, aligning their strategies to counter American trade disruptions. Trade lawyer Robert Glasgow has explained that rather than negotiating new deals, these nations are focusing on coordinating their responses to handle U.S. trade volatility, particularly in crucial sectors like automotive manufacturing where vehicles cross borders multiple times during production. This alignment represents a fundamental shift in North American trade dynamics, with America's two largest neighbors preparing to defend themselves against Trump's economic aggression. The broader economic implications are staggering. Canada's retaliatory measures are hitting American exporters hard, while Trump's tariffs are driving up costs for American consumers and businesses. The Bank of Canada has been forced to adjust its monetary policy in response to Trump's trade war, creating uncertainty that's rippling through both economies. Meanwhile, Canadian officials are preparing counter tariffs that will make American goods more expensive for Canadian consumers, further reducing demand for U.S. products. Trump's failure extends beyond economics into basic diplomacy. Opposition leaders in Canada have pointedly criticized Prime Minister Trudeau, noting that his rare presence in Washington has been noted with growing concern. The lack of high-level engagement between the two nations' leaders reflects the breakdown in what was once the world's closest bilateral relationship. Trump's crude attempts to intimidate Canada through social media posts showing maps of Canada as part of the United States, his mocking references to Governor Trudeau, and his threats of economic coercion have transformed America's closest ally into a skeptical neighbor. A recent Pew Research Center survey shows that Canadian opinions of the United States are at historic lows, with a majority of Canadians now viewing the U.S. as the top threat to their country, ranking America as more dangerous than China. This represents a complete reversal from previous years when 52% of Canadians had confidence in President Biden's leadership. Now only 22% of Canadians have faith in Trump doing the right thing in world affairs. The geopolitical consequences extend far beyond North America. Security experts have observed that Russia appears to be winning its conflict both on the ground and in the air, while Western attempts to use economic pressure have proven largely ineffective. With Russia receiving strong support from China and India, and with multiple workarounds in place for sanctions, the Western strategy of economic coercion is making Western economic pressure attempts look increasingly desperate and ineffective.
The Russians are winning the war on the ground and in the air, and the only way that the Europeans, the Ukrainians, Canadians, Americans are trying to pressure the Russians to stop, never mind lose, stop, is economics. And on that one, that's a tough road for them to actually succeed in pushing the Russians to where they want them to be. The Russians have the full support of China, India as well. They have multiple workarounds in place. So I think this is a bit, if I might say, a desperate attempt by the West to pressure the Russians to come to a ceasefire and stop on the road to defeating Ukraine.
This failure of economic warfare as a tool of foreign policy undermines Trump's entire approach to international relations. This isn't just a political problem, it's an economic disaster that's costing American businesses billions in lost revenue and opportunities. The housing market crash caused by fleeing Canadian buyers is just the beginning. Trump's trade war is creating inflationary pressures that could force the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates, making mortgages more expensive for American home buyers. Construction companies are already struggling with higher material costs, and Trump's threats to deport immigrant workers could create labor shortages that drive costs even higher. Canadian businesses and investors are also pulling back from U.S. markets, creating a broader economic decoupling that will hurt both entries for years to come. The integrated North American supply chains that have created prosperity on both sides of the border are being disrupted by Trump's protectionist policies, leading to higher costs and reduced efficiency across multiple industries. What makes Trump's approach even more self-defeating is that it ignores the fundamental reality of the U.S.-Canada relationship. The two countries share the world's longest undefended border, have deeply integrated economies, and have been allies through every major conflict of the past century. Canada is America's largest source of imported energy, providing crucial oil and electricity that powers American homes and businesses. Threatening to destroy this relationship for short-term political gain is the height of strategic incompetence. The timing of Trump's trade war couldn't be worse for America's housing market, which is already struggling with affordability issues and supply shortages. By driving away Canadian buyers who have traditionally provided a crucial source of demand, Trump is making America's housing crisis worse while simultaneously increasing construction costs through his tariffs on building materials. Trump's defenders might argue that he's playing hardball to get better trade deals, but the evidence shows that his strategy is failing on every level. Canadian officials have made it clear that they will not be bullied into submission, and they have the economic tools to fight back effectively. Canada's vast natural resources, stable democratic institutions, and strong international relationships give it multiple options for reducing its dependence on the U.S. market. Meanwhile, Trump's threats are pushing Canada closer to other international partners. Canadian officials are exploring new trade relationships and supply chains that would reduce their vulnerability to American economic coercion. This long-term strategic shift will cost American businesses market share and influence that will be difficult to recover even after Trump leaves office. The real tragedy is that Trump's approach is unnecessary and counterproductive. The U.S. and Canada have one of the world's most successful trading relationships, with both countries benefiting from integrated supply chains and complementary economies. Rather than building on this success, Trump is tearing it down based on outdated mercantilist thinking that views trade as a zero-sum game. As Canadian homebuyers continue to flee American markets and construction costs continue to rise due to Trump's tariffs, the full scope of this self-inflicted economic wound is becoming clear. Trump's promise to make America great again is turning into a reality of making America more expensive, more isolated, and less attractive to the foreign investment it needs to grow and prosper. The collapse in Canadian interest in U.S. real estate is just the most visible symptom of a broader failure of Trump's economic nationalism. By choosing confrontation over cooperation, threats over diplomacy, and economic coercion over mutual benefit, Trump is proving once again that his approach to international relations creates more problems than it solves. The American housing market is paying the price for his miscalculations, and the damage will take years to repair.